Before I get into it, I just want to say again how pleased I am to be here with you, to be working with you, and looking forward to the next, I don't know, 11 and a half months together. What an adventure. I'm wondering if any of you have had an experience like this one. I've been out somewhere when the topic of church has come up, or the topic of religion comes up, and I say something about church or my religion, and people turn and look at me. And sometimes in the moment, I'm sorry I said anything because I know what's coming next. Oh, what church? I'm a Unitarian Universalist, I tell them. And then more often than not, there's silence, puzzled looks, brows turning up, more silence. And I can see people searching their mental files, Unitarian Universalist. So they're looking between the S's and the W's. Sweetbargian? No. Wesley, there's no U in there other than United. What's this Unitarian Universalist? And they pause, having failed to pull the file, and ask, what's that? That's a seemingly easy question, right? But you know, if you've ever had the experience as I have, it can be tricky. I usually say something like Unitarian Universalist comes from the Christian tradition, but is no longer exclusively Christian. Ours is a tradition which encourages each person to wrestle with the big questions and answer them in ways that make sense to them. I tell people that we have no creed, no agreement on the nature or existence of God or gods, no prescribed understandings about Jesus or the afterlife, or even if there is an afterlife. And then I usually get more puzzled looks. How can you be a religion if you don't agree on those things? What holds you together? What I'm about to tell you is not likely to come as a surprise to any one of you. Unitarians and Universalists have a long history of being heretics. Heresy in Greek means choice. Historically, those who identified as Unitarian and Universalist were people who made choices. Originally, before the year 325, when the Nicene Council established basic Christian doctrines of the Trinity and theories about eternal damnation, Unitarian and Universalist beliefs were some of the choices available to those who understood the teachings of Jesus to be fundamental. But after 325, those who disagreed with the established church did so at the risk of persecution. In the 16th and 17th century, there were brief flowerings of Unitarian thought, Unitarian meaning in those earlier times, not Trinitarian. God was one, not three. The book by the Spaniard Michael Servetus on the errors of the Trinity was widely circulated. Poland had a Unitarian community, but eventually the Polish Unitarians were suppressed and Servetus was burned at the stake. It was dangerous business to be a heretic. In England, where religious harassment was not as extreme as it had been, it was still risky to make choices. Joseph Priestley, a scientist and prominent Unitarian thinker, had his laboratory burnt by an angry mob. Unitarians were barred from public office in England until 1828. Sometimes Unitarians, in order to fly under the radar, would use other terms to describe themselves to escape the notice of neighbors and officials. Presbyterian, which we understand as a particular religion, but it is a term denoting a form of church government, was often used. And to this day in Ireland, there are free non-prescribing Presbyterian churches. On this continent, Unitarianism evolved from a reaction to mid-17th century evangelicals calling for a return to Puritan orthodoxy, which taught that people were inescapably sinful. People who disagreed with that notion, who believed in free human will and the loving benevolence of God, eventually became known as Unitarian, and some of them as Universalist. Taking their cue from enlightened philosophy, the Unitarians began to apply logic and reason to religious exploration. Intellectual rigor became their path to salvation. Instead of the Calvinist dogma, which stressed obedience and faith, the Unitarians developed a philosophy which stressed voluntary ethical conduct and individual effort. They believed that there was a natural and benevolent order to the universe, which could, with study, be understood. In 1819, Unitarian minister William Ellery Channing delivered a sermon called Unitarian Christianity. Here's a quote. Our leading principle in interpreting scriptures is this, that the Bible is a book written for man, I think we could substitute human there, in the language of human, and that its meaning is to be sought in the same manner as that of any other book. With these views of the Bible, we feel it our bounden duty to exercise our reason upon it perpetually. This was not a path of blind faith. But this rational, classical, post-enlightened Unitarianism was found by some to be lacking in heart. Ralph Waldo Emerson, mentioned earlier in our story, remarked on corpse-cold Unitarianism. Some young, dissatisfied Unitarians, struggling against the sobriety, rationalism, and critical thinking, expressed other longings. Their emerging belief was that finding God, and in those early days God was still assumed, required them to navigate a path between orthodox creedalism, emotional frenzies, and a sensible, rational ethic. For them, the path they sought, their path to God, was found through a personal inner striving. This branch of inquiry became known as transcendentalism, another nice tie to our story. So those who chose to believe in universal salvation, a belief that no loving God could condemn their children, began to emerge in North America about 1780. This popular alternative to Calvinism and its ideas about predestination gained popularity. According to census data from 1851 in Canada, there were over 7,000 Universalists identified in Canada in 1851. It was popular, but it wasn't well received by people in more traditional religions. The notion that no loving father could condemn his own children was considered radical, and it drew strong opposition from those who assumed that fear of hell was the only thing that could guide our moral choices and human goodness. And then in the mid-1800s, adherents from both traditions began to ask the question, God, maybe yes, maybe no. Is there something beyond Christian scripture? Let's look at other traditions. Henry David Thoreau was influenced by Hinduism and Buddhism. And in time, some Unitarians and Universalists chose a religious life that became known as humanism, or modern humanism. And that became an important part of our tradition. So that's a little romp through history. And our tradition is full of people making choices. Today, we continue to make choices. I suspect that this Zoom room is full of nothing but a bunch of heretics. It may interest you to know that in 2001, quite a long time ago now, the Unitarian Universalist Association did a survey, and they asked people to identify their dominant religious philosophy. The survey revealed that we categorized ourselves as atheist, theist, humanist, Christian, Buddhist, Jewish, earth and nature centered, mystic, Muslim or Hindu, and other. That used all my fingers, I think. And the result of the survey also indicated that not one of those was a dominant belief. No matter who you are in our tradition, no matter what you believe, you are not in the majority. There is no one understanding. So is this an odd choice to talk about history at this moment in the life of this congregation? Isn't this a time to be asking where to instead of where from? But I think our history is particularly relevant in this moment because we are on a threshold asking what it means to be the first Unitarian congregation of Toronto. It has been a hard 5 years since the start of the pandemic. You've had opportunities to meet in person, but not in the building that many of you knew and loved. You've been in schools, you've been online, and so much has changed. And the question, who are you, is a fundamental one. We need to ask what's different now than what was, as we're on the threshold of moving into the new space. What do we understand about our personal faith journeys, and what does it mean to be in community as the First Unitarian Congregation of Toronto today? The question, how can you be a religion if you don't agree on God or prayer or any of the other religious ideas, is still an important one for us. It's still one we need to answer. Now, I know I'm happy to have my religious tradition tied to creative and courageous souls of earlier times. But all of that breadth of understanding and expression doesn't make finding an answer today easier. I know I appreciate the richness that our current diversity brings to the life in a congregation, but it doesn't make it easier to answer the question, oh, what is a Unitarian Universalist? And at times, as I have said, have floundered. And I've particularly floundered when someone asks me to articulate how our choose your own adventure faith supports and sustains me when I've sometimes struggled, when I'm accused of belonging to a tradition that has no there. What is it that comforts you if there's no God or shared beliefs? Something that defies reason for some folks. One of the things I find myself asking is what does lie at the heart of Unitarian Universalism, and what is our work in our communities? I hear people talk about these questions in terms of finding a sanctuary and finding personal freedom and comfort and other like-minded people. Trust me, you will not get an argument from me on that front. I know how comforting and at home I felt when I first sat in one of our congregations in the early 80s. I know it has been liberating to think about the world in theological terms that made sense to me. But I think we sell ourselves short if we stop there. I've come to understand that if we stop there with, oh, you get to believe what you want, that we are in effect taking the easy way out. If we stop there, we fail to truly engage our history and diversity, and I think we substitute one kind of creed for another. Rather than go really deep with one another, we sometimes, maybe out of a fear of conflict, stop short of the juicy stuff, of the honest conversations that are about difference, the engagement that comes from that, and the potential of life-changing encounters. Other times I've seen how I've seen how it's hard for us to operate as communities when sometimes our tradition of questioning, maybe this sounds familiar, translates into contrarianism at times. And I think then too, if we let ourselves get stuck in the I don't believe what you believe place, that we are getting close to becoming the fundamentals, or having fundamentalist tendencies that we sometimes criticize in others. We are a complex and complicated tradition. I hate to break it to you. We are not people of easy answers. What is a congregation today standing on a threshold of the next phase of their life to do? The answer I'm working out is that our work as people in a tradition of freedom of religious expression and voluntary association is to determine how we can stay connected and engaged without surrendering our intellectual and spiritual capacity to know our own truths. And there is a lot of tension in that, because your truths may be different than mine. But if we are to live, really live into the vital liberal religious communities we dream of, we need to live with and celebrate the tension. I've come to believe that at the core of our tradition, there is an empty space, not a desolate void, but a space that is rich with possibility. At the center of our communities and our lives is a space, a hole, a place where I believe the magic happens. I think we are at our best And in my work, I have been privileged to see us at our best when we regard that space with the attention it deserves. Without one single unifying belief about God or the afterlife or Muhammad or Jesus, without one single unifying belief about how we each become more whole, we are left with a space in the middle of our community. Sometimes I think there's a tendency to want to rush in and fill that, and to name it. I've seen attempts to fill the space and name it in a variety of ways. In some cases, people have named and filled the hole with the names of famous Unitarians and Universalists. Perhaps we can define ourselves on their coattails. I've seen social policy positions become a new kind of orthodoxy, shaming those who hold alternate views or who aren't so sure they agree. I have seen, as I said earlier, I have seen contentiousness become a fallback position, perhaps because it's easier to tell people what it is we aren't rather than what we are. As heretics, we sometimes have fallen into the habit of challenging just about everything instead of remaining curious. There is a hole at the center, and I think it is where transformation can occur. It might be easier if we all believed in God or not God. But really, isn't it the proposition of diverse understandings that provides us with our greatest strength and our potential? It seems to me that our work is of being in sacred relationship with one another, challenging, engaging, supporting one another, of staying connected even when we disagree. Sacred for me has to do with holding something as special, as worthy of being held, respected, and protected. Isn't that how all relationships should be considered? Sacred relationship requires the hard work. Not easy stuff, folks. The hard work of listening, of seeking to understand, of putting at least some of the time other people's views and ideas and preferences ahead of our own. And in the context of this religious community, it requires us to accept that we don't all agree. No doubt there are a lot of ideas and imaginings about what the next phase of congregational life is going to look like for us. Some are looking forward to picking up where we left off over 5 years ago at the start of the COVID pandemic. Others of us weren't here, so that point of reference makes absolutely no sense. So where is the path? Finding a path through this complicated terrain is not a piece of cake. This is hard work. But I have found increasingly in my life that one of my mantras has become, hard is not bad. Sometimes hard is good. Sometimes hard is exactly what we need. So how do we learn to live with the tension? How do we know how to navigate? How shall we equip ourselves? Holy curiosity. When we come to this community with an understanding of the richness of our tradition and our diversity, and with holy curiosity, we come with a respect for the relationships. We come expecting our needs to be met some of the time, but not all of the time. We come open to differences. We come with respect for the potential at the center of this and for what we are creating. And we come with patience and resolve to live with the tension. Holy curiosity means we work to honestly engage and to understand, to share ideas, and to listen to others. When I have been successful at making holy curiosity my practice, and I haven't always, I have found myself then in relationship at times with unlikely allies. I have found myself engaged in surprising ways, and I have found myself changed. I've learned things about myself. I've learned to appreciate the perspective and ideas of others. I believe I have become a more fit companion with those I encounter in my travels through life. I've become more aware and more open to the work of the world, better able to be of use and service. And I mess it up. I mess it up all the time. I'm human. And I like things the way I like things. So I strive to show compassion to myself because I'm just another person, imperfect and human, trying to get by, trying to do good, trying to live well. And I have seen how it can work. So I am committed to the practice. I've seen how well it can work. Holy curiosity, the magic that happens in our congregations and communities when we bring curiosity. What would it mean for your relationship with this community? Holy curiosity. As we move into the unknown of the next phase of this congregation's life, we'll need to equip ourselves with holy curiosity. Holy curiosity helps us live with attention. It helps us honor and protect the space at the center of who we are. The stakes are high. Our potential to live into our best selves as individuals and a community rests on our ability to bring holy curiosity to our work together. And not just here at First Unitarian Toronto, but in the world, because isn't that what the world needs? And isn't that what we've got to offer? Isn't that what we do here together when we do it well? Isn't that a wonder? I'm pleased to be on this adventure with all of you. Thank you for inviting me to come along, and I commit to bringing my holy curiosity with me. Let's all just breathe for a moment in silent reflection.